Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is Marianne-pestana, and we're here today with our special guest, Emily Francis, who's here to share with us her new book, Healing Ourselves Whole. Now, many of you know Emily. She's a highly sought-after speaker, international best-selling author, and wellness expert with an array of education experience spanning over 20 years. Her knowledge of the body, as well as the body-mind-spirit connection, is extensive, and her commitment to total body-mind-spirit wellness is her driving force. Emily holds a bachelor's degree in exercise science and wellness, a BS and master's in physical education and human performance concentration. Emily graduated from the Atlanta School of Massage in clinical and neuromuscular massage therapy and went on to specialize at the Dr. Wouters School, North America, for an MLD and CDT in manual lymphatic drainage and combined decongestive therapy. Emily holds a gold medal in the U.S. Open in Tai Chi forms. She's a Reiki Master level practitioner and has over 300 hours of yoga teacher training. So let's welcome to the show, Emily Francis.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I am so excited about this. I have to ask, what inspired you to write this book?
The inspiration behind this book is that this book, Healing Ourselves Whole, what's the work that we need to learn to do with ourselves, by ourselves? And this is the work we do alone. And it's long overdue that somebody offered something like this.
Well, I'm excited about that. And I think a lot of people are as well, because you really dive into this with a whole new perspective. Because a lot of times you hear people that look at how we heal ourselves, they're looking at it from maybe like a strictly medical perspective or energetic, and you actually kind of cross both paths.
I do. My primary work is in clinical massage therapy. So I have a degree in exercise science. I have a master's degree in human performance. So I've been studying anatomy and physiology, kinesiology for 25 years. And I went to clinical massage school somewhere in between those 25 years. And the work that I do is regarding the way that the muscles especially, but that all the soft tissues of the body is able to retain and store both traumatic experiences as well as joyful experiences, and how we can work with that for our own healing.
Well, that makes such a huge difference, the fact that we can actually impact our own healing. And I know in the book you cover many things, and, I might as well just start with here because, I think there's so much to be had in this discussion. You talk about the heavy four and the fab four. So where did those originate?
Those originated from the years of work with my hands directly on people's skin. The tissues of the body, they change. They honestly change with things that happen to us. And so when a person comes across a trauma, they change forever. But all we've really looked at is how we think about that trauma, how we understand and process that trauma. But let's say that somebody was in a car accident and their memory of what actually happened is very hazy, because that's the gift of the mind. You eject out of the body. But your body does not come with an eject button. So my work is with that part of the body that's been holding on to any experience, good or bad, heavy or positive, for all your life. So in cognitive therapy, so in psychology, there's a thing called a trauma capsule. And that is when something is too overwhelming for us to handle, and we shove it into a capsule, and then we drop it down into the body and we walk away. Well, my work starts right there. So we go and find where that capsule was dropped. Where did it plant down into the tissues? And now we open it. So that's the very beginning and full foundation of what I am here to do, is to be the other part of the healing cycle.
So I know you have a special term that you use for these capsules that are dropped into the body, because they really do take root.
They do. I consider them carrots. So to me, when you drop it into the capsule and then you go into the body, the cap, think of like a gel cap for something that you take, like a vitamin, and the gel cap disintegrates and then you get the vitamin, right? So think about like a gel cap that drops from the mind into the body. And now inside it is a seed, and the seed plants itself. And then the harvest grows, whether that's a poisonous harvest or a beautiful, bountiful harvest. But they all, to me, in my mind's eye, when my hands are on you, they look like carrots. And so when we go through the heavy four emotions, which are trauma, shame, guilt, and grief, we work with the heavy carrot that's inside, but we spot it by the greenery that the carrot grows. And we envision ourselves wrapping our hands around the whole green part of the carrot to be able to pull the full carrot, including the little strings at the end of the carrot. So the whole entire thing out of the body. But then we replace quickly with something equally as weighty. So it has to be something very healthy and healing. And so we envision a bucket of a hot liquid that instantly crystallizes into that space. Because what I've also found is, and I found this through my own experience with anxiety, is that when you are used to carrying something that's heavy, you feel really vulnerable and raw and naked when it's removed. And we tend to quickly pull back whatever it was that we're trying to release because we honestly don't know how to live without it anymore. So if we can replace with something that feels the same, but actually emanates healthy energy, then that's the steps towards healing that I'm looking for everyone.
It's almost like we develop this codependent relationship with these emotions and feelings that are so negative.
It's true. We do, because they become a weird friend. You know, it's kind of like that angel and devil that you carry around on your shoulder, but you can't really go without one. So you kind of have them both. So think about like, you know, the darker side is the carrots of the heavy four, and the lighter side is the carrots of the fab four. And it's, you still need a balance. You have to still have a balance. It's not like we remove these things and then now you don't remember that they ever happened. It's just that now you can remember them in a way that makes it accessible and livable.
So when people see you, and I know you've been very busy, you're probably booked out forever now, and just more kind of teaching the teachers, when you're working with people and you see that they've got these carrots, having them release that, is that something that you see a lot of people afraid of because they're afraid that they're going to just like lose control and have all this emotion?
Yes, people don't like to be in that position. So when you're going for an emotional release, you can't plan for it. So you can't call and schedule and go, look, I've got really heavy stuff going on. Can you help me pull it out? It tends to happen organically. And when those things do happen, when the person on the table and my hands come together to the same place that says, all right, we really have to go deeper now. And we're going to have to go into this space and remove it and be willing to face it. There's a lot of tears. A lot of people break a sweat. A lot of people shake. Some people yell. So you have to be in a space that's safe. And that's my job. My job is to create a safe space for you. So I always give like the talk before we do any body work that there's no judgment in this room. Anything that you say will never be repeated nor judged. This is your safe space. You can, or you can choose not to speak about anything. The other part is, we don't have to have this big dialogue. So if I can, help take you through, but then what it is that you're trying to pull out, you don't have to share that with me. You don't have to say it out loud. I can still feel the energy. There's a wonderful doctor who I never got to meet, but I've studied his work for craniosacral therapy, and his name is Dr. John Upledger. And when I met with his son to interview him for the work, the thing that he said that resonated so big, and I didn't realize until I heard it this way, is the same way that I run any practice too. And that is that Dr. Upledger always told people, I don't want to hear your story before you get on the table, because I don't want to be distracted by the story that your body has to tell me. Because people think they come in with one story, and the truth is your body may have a completely different story. So a lot of times with people, I don't, because I'm not a psychologist. So you're not sitting down and sharing your deepest, darkest secrets. So you get on the table and we have a dialogue with your body, and it may or may not be what you came to talk about, but it may be what your body needs you to know. And I love that about Dr. Upledger. He also says the other thing that I love so much about him, his number one rule is you are never the healer, which I agree to. Because it's your body, it's the wisdom, it's the inner, he calls it your inner physician. I call it, the wisdom of the body. But it's interesting to come and meet somebody's son and realize that their work was so in line with mine, that what I've been doing all these years, I just didn't have as many titles for it and descriptions the way that he did. But it's true, because your body usually comes in with a whole different story, and I don't really want to be distracted by the story you think you need to tell me.
Yeah, because I mean, we all have stories that we attach to different events. And it's interesting, I just really was really not just surprised, but really had a great honor for the way that you approach things because you're really allowing the body to work itself through whatever's going on.
Yes, and I'm grateful for that, because my naturopath that I've been seeing for many years now, one of the things that he says that he sees constantly in his practice is that it all comes down to being willing to give yourself permission to heal. And that's the place that I come to, because we're talking to your body. I'm not talking to your mind. I don't want to talk to your mind. Your mind is distracting. That's why the Buddhists call it the monkey mind. That's why Native Americans call it the coyote trickster medicine. Our minds play tricks on us. They're really busy. But when you sit down and you just work with the body, your body's like this wisdom, wisdom place. And the conversations are very different. They're very to the point, because not like somebody's body sits down and just tells me stories. Somebody's body signals to me, I've been holding this for a long time. Can you help me work it through?
Now, do you find often that when you're working with somebody, there's more than one carrot? And if so, is it difficult to remove more than one when in one session?
It is. That's why even in the book, I tell you to just do one, because, you know, you really need to sit with that, and you need to listen to everything that the body is trying to say. So there is lots of different carrots, but you just need to work on one. So that's the other part is, there's the book takes you through, and you repeat the chapter for that emotion as many times as you need to. So you go through the meditation, which is on my website, healingourselveswhole.com. You can go to the audio tab and you can listen to me and Mark Van Allen, who's a music producer and hypnotherapist and a steel guitar player. So the music's really pretty. But you can keep repeating the meditation on trauma 10, 11, 12, however many times, because however many carrots are in your body for that, go back through. But today, just do it once and write in the journal once. And that's why I love that I finally found a home for this book, because I really was adamant that the journal had to be part of the process, which a lot of publishers didn't want to have the journal in. And I wasn't willing to do the book without it. And that's hard. It's hard to stick to your guns and go, no, this has to be part of the practice. And the journaling in here is very guided. So it's not like a whimsical. It's very, what did your body have to say? Where was it located? There's a picture of the body, and you X mark the spot on where it was in the body. And you write all this down so that you don't have to keep up with the memory of it. And also, if you go through these journals, and you can actually download multiple journals on my website as well, on Healing Ourselves Whole, you'll find a tab for journals. So you can print it out. So even though there's one journal per chapter in the book, you can go back and print out the same paper so that you can keep refilling it for however many times you need to visit that emotion inside your body. But definitely this book is not to sit down cover to cover. This is not leisure reading. It's not, I'm going to go sit by the pool and I'm going to go read this book halfway through. Like, take it slow. That's what it's meant to be, your helper and your guide.
So, when you're also hearing from people, let's say they don't know what caused the trauma, they know that something's happened, they have no memory. How do you handle that?
Well, that's not actually happened to me, to be honest. It's a little bit, because when my hands are there and I'm actually with you, and my hands are touching potentially that part of the body or near that part of the body usually starts speaking. So even if people are hazy on the memories, we're letting the body do the talking. See, so a lot of times you don't remember things because you're only going by way of the mind, and the mind can suppress things. But again, your body does not want to suppress. This is where a lot of chronic illness or chronic pain comes from. This is where a lot of autoimmune illness, some people, and I'm not one of them, let me preface with that, but some people consider an autoimmune disease to be under the mental stack. I agree that it's a major part of it, but it is absolutely not the only. And I think it's a little short-sighted to decide that. But in saying so, a lot of these chronic pains, aches, discomforts that are occurring is because the body really wants you to hear what it has to say, and you keep choosing not to listen. And a lot of that is because we just simply were never taught how.
So I know in your book you talk about unintentional trauma. So what is that and how does that impact our bodies?
Unintentional trauma came to me when I was thinking about how I have all these weird little quirks and things in my body ever since I had a C-section. The C-section was executed flawlessly. My doctor was absolutely perfect. She didn't mean to cause me any harm, but it's a trauma anyway. My body was severed. A child was pulled through. The muscles were slit. Split open. That's a huge trauma to your body. It's an assault, but it's not a vicious assault. So when I think of unintentional trauma, the outcome was never to cause you harm. The outcome was to save you, or the outcome was in good faith or good thoughts. But still, you received some sort of impact that affected you forever. So that's what I consider an unintentional trauma. And the easiest one is childbirth, because if you had a beautiful natural birth, you still have trauma. Nobody comes out of any kind of birthing and says, everything is exactly like it was before, because that's just not true. But it is traumatic. And I remember teaching a yoga class one night, and I used to try to find the greatest music for relaxation at the end. And I was given a CD from a doctor at the local hospital, at Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta. This doctor got together with somebody and he made this music that sounded like angel music and then had a baby's heartbeat in the background. So people would use it for like rebirthing meditations or just as a background. And I thought, tonight for yoga, I'm going to do like a whole rebirthing. We're going to just, really go deep inside our bodies and, open back up. But what I didn't realize is it put one of my yoga students into massive trauma because she had twins and thankfully they both survived, but it was an unbelievably traumatic birth. So being strapped to hearing that heart monitor and then hearing the heartbeat, this faint heartbeat in the back of the music, was incredibly overwhelming to her. And she came up, she bawled her eyes out. It was so overwhelming. And it wasn't like, oh, I feel so much better now. Wow, I feel healed. Instead, it was like, Emily, can you please never, ever, ever play that music in class ever again? And it opened my eyes, because back then I'd never had children. I was single. It was like, oh, wow, that didn't even cross my mind that could be such a trigger, to someone, but it's such a trigger, now I understand it more.
So when you look at unintentional trauma, what are some things that people never really consider to be trauma?
Words, anything verbal that, I think people now are really understanding the impact of words, but only if they're really cut you to the bone words. And they might not realize that sometimes words that were never said to you, but you were a witness to, can cause that unintentional trauma. So look right now at all the violence. You can just turn on the news and feel unintentional trauma. Somebody who's super sensitive, for me in animal rescue, I felt traumatized often by seeing what the human condition can do to a poor defenseless animal. That's still unintentional trauma. I'm still going to have the memories of those photos that I've seen, or different animals that I've picked up and helped try to save, or taken in to be euthanized humanely because they were mangled. That's unintentional trauma too. So even the best helpers in the world, if you're doing something really kind or helpful to the community or to people or to animals, you're going to suffer at some point some sort of unintentional trauma. So now it's just understanding it, because I do think sometimes even if you see bullying, but you weren't the one being bullied, you can still be traumatized. My children are incredibly sensitive. If they see something that's hurtful, it impacts them, even though they weren't the person that was on the receiving end. So it happens more often than we realize, but to the levels and the depth is really on a personal level, because I say this in the book, no one knows your story but you. So you could have the same family go through the same trauma and still not one of them would have the same story as the other. And it wouldn't affect each person the exact same way. So however you in your mind and your body takes on your environment, especially when things are really painful or sad, then the way that you take in that trauma is completely specific to you.
So I know a lot of people with this pandemic have really had a hard time. Would that be considered an unintentional trauma as well?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. I mean, think about there's no way nobody's coming out of this the same person that they were. That's just a fact. Whether they come out better, whether they come out and barely make it, there has been so many deaths, so many deaths, some at their own hands, some at the pandemic, many at the pandemic. Everybody has been affected in some way. So even though whatever the cause of the pandemic might be considered something else, but the effects of the pandemic, it's unintentional trauma. It's everybody's going to come out with some level that they're going to have to work through. We're in the modern day plague. This is history right now. We're living in a really intense time in the world. And some people can sort of go forward and go, this is one of the most sacred moments, the fact that we get to live through it, if you are so lucky, if you are so blessed. But our mindset is going to play a key role here. And so is our body. We have to know how things are affecting us inside. So what I can say to anybody who's listening, as you are affected or as you feel your feelings, try to trace them. So from hearing or seeing or whatever sensory input you've got from every situation, try to follow it down into the body and see where it's sitting. And then try not to let it sit too deeply. So you be on guard, be the watch guard to your own body and how it's handling the outside and the input, the sensory input.
So I know you talk about the difference between re-experiencing the trauma and feeling our feelings. And, I'd love for you to share the difference.
So when you go back through and you do some trauma work, or people call it shadow work, and you're going back into a particular time in your life, what I want you to do is not go back in as the main character. Now I just want you to go back as the narrator, as the observer. You don't have to re-experience the actual trauma again. But you do have to be able to sit next to it and observe it. And then know what part you can play to help it. Because what I don't want you to do is become a victim where you just sit down and you keep watching and then it goes on repeat and you keep watching. Nothing has changed then. You're still traumatized. So that's why we work with the carrots. That's why we listen to what the body has to say and we sit with the body. We sit next to the carrot in the actual book and we listen to what the carrot has to say. And then those feelings and energy goes into the carrot, not into us again. And then we remove the carrot. So you're the narrator. You're the second role. You're not back inside again, experiencing what it was that happened the first time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I think it's really good for people to hear that because I would think, gosh, okay, if I've got these emotions and feelings from a while back, and it was really rough, I don't know if I want to re-experience that.
For sure. Nobody wants to re-experience it, but here's the part that I think we miss, because I've heard this a lot. But it's not like you've never thought about it since the time it happened. There are triggers all the time that bring you into that place. It's just how long do you stay there and how far are you willing to listen? And at what point are you going to let your body tell its story? Because what happens is you're listening to the story that your mind has been holding on to for so long and you're suppressing the other parts. So it's not like since that moment that it happened, you've never gone back. That's just not true. But now we're going back with a plan.
A plan to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah. We're moving back with a plan, with an actual execution plan of action that can change the way that it's been sitting inside you for all this time so that you can come out and feel lighter. Doesn't everybody actually want that? I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to actually live your best life. So whatever it is that's blocking you from living your best life, it's time to get really still and listen to what that is. And I'm just one part. My book and my work is just the part of your body. I definitely always recommend seeing a therapist. For sure. And if it's a super trauma, I recommend seeing an EMDR therapist, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a very specific way of approaching trauma because they believe that trauma gets tracked in your brain and frozen in time from the moment that it happened. So that particular brain track never aged. So if you were 5 when something happened and you're 70 now, we're still approaching a 5-year-old in that neural tube of the brain. And so we're helping to bring it out of its old time and into the present. That's what EMDR therapy does. Now they move the eyes side to side to help move the brain. I'm helping you get into the body so you can do somewhat similar of the moves. It's just that I believe that the memories that are tracked inside the body are slightly different than the memories that are tracked inside the mind. And do remember that the mind and the brain are not the same thing. So it's really important that everybody understands that, because your mind is where the thoughts and behaviors live, and your brain is an actual organ. So your brain is where the chemicals and the receptors and the dopamine transmitters, all these little synapses, they live in your brain. It's the motherboard of your body. But the mind is over what you think. So the brain is a psychiatrist, who you got to go to. And the mind is a psychologist and a talk therapist and a hypnotherapist and EMDR. All that behavior work goes under the mental, the cognitive.
Well, and thank goodness we're talking about this now. I mean, a lot of people really have mental health on the forefront, and this all ties in together with that.
Absolutely, it does. And that's another part, is that the mental health, you have to bring the body in, and the breath. I mean, it's simple. People really overlook how massively important your breathing is, but your breathing is attached to every emotion. So when you get anxious, your breath gets short and shallow, high in the chest. When you get angry, your breath gets huffy and puffy and short, also in the chest. When you're feeling bliss, your breath goes all the way down deep into the belly. If you watch a baby laugh, it's so deep in the belly. But the breath is where all of it starts and stops. So like in yoga, they say you can cause or cure any disease through breath. So the shorter that your breath is on a constant, the more connected to heart attack and stroke you will be.
So, out of the heavy 4 emotions, what is one that you see that sticks out with, like, everyone comes and they've got some of that going on?
Well, I believe that trauma, guilt, and shame are the things that always go together. You're not going to see one without those 3. It's a cycle. So it's a trauma, guilt, shame cycle. But the grief is its own beast, and it's not like trauma, guilt, and shame. Grief is something that slices you in half. It just does. It changes everything about who you are, where you are, what you're experiencing. Grief is something so powerful that I'm not asking you to heal it. I'm asking you to learn to carry it and it not be as heavy. But I certainly would never ask somebody to try to release grief, not in that way. And this is what I mean. I say this in the book. I talk about this. I lost my father, who was the love of my life. He was an incredible father. I lost him at 13. I was 13 years old. He was only 43. He went to go play tennis and he never came home. So you can imagine that the trauma of a 13-year-old child who loved her dad more than everything was massive. And I remember years later going to some therapist, and they said, "Tell me something good that came out of his death." And I have to tell you that I still so strongly disagree with ever doing that to somebody on grief. Don't make me find the silver lining. It's mean. It's mean to do to somebody. It was hurtful to me to have anybody make me try to find something good in something that destroyed almost my entire everything. I had to rebuild. I had to become a different version of myself just to survive it. So don't make me sit down and think about what came good. Now, things came positive later, but not because of, absolutely not because of, but in spite of, maybe. But I do think that the way that we approach grief needs to change a little bit and be respected a little bit more.
Do you think that that's why some people kind of hold themselves back from living their whole impactful life, because they get in that grief cycle?
Yes. And then you bring in trauma, guilt, shame, because then you bring in guilt. every time, so if somebody's grieving and they're really in grief, and then they experience something that's lighthearted or funny, and they actually let go and they do this real, authentic, deep belly laugh, then they find themselves feeling guilty because they just had fun. Or they develop a pattern, and this is the pattern that I'm trying so hard with this book to help people recognize so that we can shift it, is that just because you sat still and were present to the happiness and the joy and let your muscles and the body response to feeling blissful does not mean that catastrophe is looming the corner. And that's where we go wrong, is that we don't just stay in the present and allow ourselves to feel the positive things, because we have developed a new pattern from mostly from grief, but also the guilt, that we don't really know what to do with ourselves when we feel genuinely happy. Because when we feel genuinely happy, that becomes scary.
Yeah, that's something that people go, ooh, it's almost like they can't allow themselves to feel that. And I wonder if some of that's like learned behavior as well.
I do. I think it is learned behavior for sure. I know that I have picked up a lot of learned behaviors from my friends, from my family, where I've had to really, as I've grown and done so much introspective work, where I'll realize where that outside behavior came in, and then I'll have to try to redirect it and then teach myself, this isn't actually what I believe anymore. I want to enjoy this good time because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So I do want to have fun, because especially now in this time when so many people have left the planet, there's got to be some point where you look back and go, I wish I would have let myself play more. Because nobody's sitting on their deathbed saying, I wish I would have worked more.
For sure.
you know?
And that's interesting because a lot of times people do have certain things to look back on. And, it has me kind of thinking with removing one of these heavy four items, the carrots, and then we're replacing it with a fab four. Is that too much of a stretch for some people to go, okay, well, I'm removing guilt, but now I'm putting, happiness or joy in there. That's so foreign. How am I going to work with that?
Well, that's why we work through all four of the heavy four before we ever get on that bridge to the other side, to the fabulous four, because you do have to clean out and you have to make room to get over there. And the action bridge is suppress, which keeps you on the heavy side, process, which doesn't mean anything more than you're willing to let the memories uplift off the tissues, and then release. Now we're choosing to do something with them. And once you go through those over and over again of the heavy four, maybe I did trauma 25 times. Maybe I'm so tired of that chapter, I don't want to hear my voice anymore. And then guilt and shame, maybe I did it 2-3 times. It's up to whatever person's experience. And then grief, maybe they only visited that once. Maybe they're going to put that on hold and go back, but at least they visited once. Now we can step onto the action bridge. Now we can go through the process and release part so that we can make some more space and then go into those fab four, which is happy, joy, connected, and empowered. And empowered is so different, I think, than the way that I was originally taught to maybe view the idea of being empowered. But the way that I see it through the body is very different and very humble and very balanced.
So is it even possible for us to, meditate and really identify the different things that are going on with our body?
It is absolutely possible, but everything's about learning to get still and silent, and then learning how your body communicates with you. And that is very individual, but I give enough of a space in this book that you can figure that out, and it doesn't detract from whatever it is that I've written. Because I did everything I could to give you the power over your own body to do this work.
So let's talk about the Fab Four. So what are those?
So happy, joy, connected, and empowered. And if I may, I'll just briefly go over what those mean. So happy is a lightness. Happy is something that happens every single day. We may choose not to play with it when it comes, but happy is a part of a daily life. So smiling, giggling, putting in a comedy show, it's it doesn't go so deep into the body, but it happens so often that your body is able to recognize the experience when it comes. So happy is a really important part of the healing, but it's not a deeply physiological experience. Next is joy, which is a deeply physiological experience. Joy, in my opinion, is held within the muscle tissue in the same way that trauma is. So if somebody they are triggered or they experience a trauma, you can be triggered and experience a joy. And when you sit in that space and let your muscle memory open, you can have flashback memories. So let's say you're 16 again because you heard this song and all of a sudden you're back in your boyfriend's car and you can smell his cologne and you remember how elated you felt all over your body. And you have this really empowering, exciting experience because you're back in time. That is the release from muscle memory, but it's also the release of the dopamine receptors. So when you start to feel that joy and have that muscle memory release and you're back in time or you're feeling it, notice that people tend to close their eyes. They savor it. They want to put it back in their body. They want their body to experience that, even though they might not be thinking, oh, blood vessels and cells heal me. But that's what's happening. So joy is massive. I think it's huge, and more on a body scale. Next is connected. So think about when your body is in chaos, nothing is connected. So think about like a train track of positive and negative charged magnets. And in your body, when it's in chaos, they're all facing the same way, positive to positive, negative to negative, and they're all being repelled all over your body. So cellular structure, cellular memory, plasma, blood, fascia, all of it. So all of a sudden your fascia is tangling up because you're disconnected. And then you take it even deeper, you're disconnected from your mind, right? They call it disassociation, but it's when everything's not going in the same place to the same end goal, you're not in a space of being connected. But think about what happens when all of that shifts and your mind and your body and every fiber of your being decides to put everybody on the same one team for the same exact outcome. And then boom, the positive to negative line up, choo-choo on the tracks, and they're moving towards your greatest good, your highest joy, and your supreme health. And it is possible, and it has happened to so many people, and there's no reason in the world that it cannot happen to you. So that's connected. And then the final one is empowered. And that is where you can experience happy. You can really sit with the joy. Your body is in full connection. And now you take it out into the streets and you go out wherever you need to be, and you're not distracted. It's not changing the space with the outside environment. So any outside stimulus or factors does not affect the perfect balance and joy that you are experiencing within yourself as a full connectedness. And now you have experienced empowered. You're out in the world with it. Isn't that awesome?
That's so awesome. And when you're working with people, what seems out of the Fab Four, what is the one that's easiest for people to reach and accept?
Easiest?
Or the one that they can most accept?
I'd say joy. Especially if they're working with me because I can talk to their muscles. So joy. I think they can most accept joy when I start to talk about the memory release and the muscles, the part that your body really plays. People gravitate towards joy. And the most difficult one, I think, is connected. I think connected is a tough one because that means you can't have anybody voting against the outcome. So all your mind, all that mental chatter that likes to go back and forth and be anxious can't be. You got to all be on the same one team. And that's, I think, the hardest one to achieve. And then when I think you get there by experiencing joy and by allowing yourself the fleeting, exciting sensations of happy without coupling those thoughts with chaos and fear. And when you can do that, you're finally connected and then take it out into the world and you are now empowered. You can now, I remember my friend saying this. I was dating a guy and he was saying something about some woman, how she can hold her space. And he said it with such awe. And I'll be honest, I felt immediately jealous. What does that mean? What does that mean that she can hold her space? I contemplated that statement for years, honestly, for years. It was a weird trigger to me when I heard him explain this woman that she can really hold her own space. And now I think of that as that final place of being empowered. You're in your space and you have full control over it. You've stepped into whatever amount of energy your body can hold without it being out of control, without it being in chaos. You can hold your own space. So now I kind of interchange those ideas, empowered or holding your own space, because it feels really powerful. If somebody were to say that to me, like, I really like Emily and she's really, I feel really comfortable around her. She can really hold her own space. She holds it well. Like, that to me is such a compliment, but that's what it feels like. I had to think about that for a long time. What is that?
I can understand why. I think most people would feel the same way, going, okay, well, that just sounds like someone's coming from a very authentic, empowered place,
But it can be
and
intimidating.
yeah, well, who doesn't want to come from there, right?
Right. Who doesn't? Because when I first heard it, I was jealous and intimidated. And I thought, I wonder if I would ever get to the place where you would describe me that way. And then I realized I don't care if he would describe me like that or not, but would I describe myself that way? And that's where the work came.
So I know we talked about this a little bit ago. You chatted about how there are journal prompts in the book. So why are those there?
Uh, for a couple of different reasons, but mostly because it's really important that we document what we learned, what we went through with our body, because it's the same thing that I talk about with any kind of overwhelm with your mind, is that it's open to interpretation. We don't want that to happen later on. So as you go through and you start to work with your body and you listen to its messages, if you don't document it in that space and in that moment, your mind might change the story yet again. And that negates what we just did. So the journal is really, really important so that we can stay in that space and go back to it as needed. And one of the things that I do in the journal is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sensory practice to help you remember the story that was inside your body, not the story in your mind. So we do 5 things you can see from the story, 4 things you could touch, 3 things you could hear, 2 things you could smell while you were in that space, and 1 thing you could taste. And then, what was the story that the carrot shared with you? What did it present when you were on that space? Where was it located in your body? How did it appear? How was it different, if it was different than the story that you identify with? Did you learn anything different than what this carrot had to share with you? Those are things that you can go back and go, okay, this is how my body speaks to me. This is where I might feel something, or this was the story. And these are the things that I could smell. I mean, I bring up car accident, but to me, the couple of times in my life that I've been in a car accident, it always tastes like aluminum foil in my mouth. It's like eating metal. It's this heat thing that happens. And it's in that space of impact and trauma. And I would put that down into this journal of the 2 things that you could taste. One would be the aluminum foil, and then whatever else was going on. Those are significant memory triggers.
So have you seen somebody that you've worked with that when they remove this negative stored emotion, the heavy 4, and start really filling themselves up with the fab 4, that their health makes a dramatic improvement?
I've seen people get pregnant. I've seen people get through cancer. I've seen people do amazing, miraculous things. I can't say yes deep enough, because your body has all the magic that it needs to heal, but you have to figure out the right path to get on. And I worked on a woman who had ovarian cancer, and her chance of surviving was that there was one particular chemo and it had to be this chemo, and her body rejected the chemo. And I don't really know what that means, but her oncologist sent her to me. And he said, look, there's a woman in town. I don't know what she does, but have her get your body to take that chemo. And so we did about 2 hours of really intense hands-on energy release, talking to her body, her remembering stories. And what had happened is, when she was very, very young, a person in her family put their hands on her in a way that no adult should ever touch a child, and she never remembered it. And then years later, he got sober and made amends. And when he came to apologize, she was diagnosed with cancer just months after, ovarian, right there in the sex organ place. I mean, it's textbook emotional illness, right? And so we did the release, and that next week she went back and her body was able to take the chemo. And she's in like year 12 now of remission. She is the one that locked it in, and she is the one that had the key to unlock. I just helped her remember and work through it and take away the victim mentality, because immediately it's like, what did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this? She was so young. But at that time she had a child right around that age. And so I would say, okay, would it be your child's fault? If somebody did this, would you look at your child and think, why would you do this? And that's what triggered her. She started crying and shaking. I thought she was going to vomit. I pulled the trash can next to her, but it made her see that she was never, ever involved in this. This was something that happened to her. And now she could take her power back and make herself healthy and not keep that absorbed into her body. So yes, when you take away those heavy things, that shame, that guilt, that trauma, your body can do extraordinary, extraordinary things. And that is the reason, all the reasons why I wrote the book in the first place, was to see more of that, but people be able to do it on their own.
So do you have tips for people to create harmony, just not inside themselves, but also in their surroundings?
That changes when you change. When you start to do the work deep inside yourself, you will be amazed how many things fall away, how many friends fall away, how many friends come around. Your insides will reflect the outside, but you have to keep your eyes open and be aware and be willing to make decisions and be willing to lose some of those people that don't bring goodness to your life. And that's the hard part too, but it will come. You will start to get better ability to discern what is healthy and what is not around you when you start to put yourself first and really go down deep and create a new version of yourself that is not as destructible. You're coming into empowered. Who's allowed to be there and who isn't anymore.
Yeah, that's such an empowering place to really come from, because you're really the master of your own ship then.
I used to say, no one is invited to this already beautifully decorated table if you don't have something to bring to it.
Oh, I love that. That's a pretty good saying. Well, and it has me thinking, I know you also do affirmations in the book. Why are those important?
Because the more that you repeat the same small words, the more that you can actually carve out new mind grooves in your thought patterns. So in yoga, they call it a samskara, and that means mind groove. But everything that you think actually creates these grooves in your mind. Remember, your mind is not your brain. Brain is your chemicals. Your mind is where your thoughts live. So you have these mind grooves that you follow down. And the more that you keep expressing a shortened chant, if you will, or mantra of something healthy, the more that you start to believe it. So repeat, repeat, repeat. Keep it simple. Keep it easy. The mantra that I use for myself that I love, and it's so funny. I wrote this in the last 2 books. I put it in, and my editor wrote me, and she's like, you have to quote whoever made this up. You can't just throw this down. And I said, okay, it's me. It's an Emily original. And it was born in yoga. I had gone back to yoga and I was feeling unbelievably overwhelmed and anxious. And I was debating on, should I walk out or should I stay? And so I turned to my inside in my body and I said, every cell in my body is reprogramming itself to function at healthy, optimum levels. And I said it for a straight hour. Every cell in my body is reprogramming itself to function at healthy, optimum levels. And by the end of the class, I felt balanced, healthy, centered, invigorated, and proud of myself that I stayed. And I didn't just stay. I didn't stay in a space of fear. I changed the energy. I manipulated it into something useful because I kept repeating. I wouldn't let myself have any thoughts but that mantra over and over. And it's whatever you want to do for the day, or however you want to, if it's about love or if it's about health or vitality or myself or how I view other people. You can make up whatever mantra, but say it or put it. I used to write it down and put it in my wallet. Just things that I needed to remember, because my mind was a place that was a little, the minefield that I used to live in was dangerous. I've cleaned it up. It was like Chester, the singer of Linkin Park, used to say the most dangerous place was that lived between his ears, between the 2 ears, was the most dangerous place for him in his life because of the thoughts that he would entertain. And, unfortunately, he lost that battle, but we don't have to. You can change the dynamic by changing and carving new mind grooves. So affirmations, visualizations, small, short, simple sentences put on repeat can change every day. And if you change day by day, then you'll start to look and it'll be a week, a month, a year, your life.
I think that's so empowering because you can pick one thing every day and work on that one thing.
I always love that the Reiki prayer is just for today. It starts with just for today. And everything is just for today. Just for today, I will be happy. Just for today, I will do this. So even if you just start there, just for today, I will, and then whatever it is that you need for the day. Some people are still going into work and to a place that they hate. So just for today, I will function healthy and balanced no matter where I am.
So, Emily, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work and be part of your community?
You can go to healingourselveswhole.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. I do a monthly newsletter. You can follow me on any of the social media sites. I put out a lot of videos, and I'm going to start doing a lot more videos, but healingourselveswhole.com.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I love being on your show, always.
Well, thank you, Emily. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Healing Ourselves Whole. Healing Ourselves Whole is available everywhere you buy books, and of course, it's available on Kindle. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.